So, shall we kick off with Spider-Man Far From Home? No, No Way Home. Because, because this is the
Far
thing.
from No Way Home. No, no, I think that was quite right.
Far From Nowhere Homecoming. So, so, no, because that's what they've done. I mean, I like the fact because obviously the fact that you had or when Spider-Man was made into a film with like the Sam Raimi movies all the way back in the early 2000s that you had like Spider-Man 1, 2, 3 and then you had the Amazing Spider-Man 1, 2 and I love the fact that Marvel just went, no, we're just gonna. I think the first one, when they call it Homecoming, because there is this whole extra theme between who owns Spider Man, or is it Marvel or is it Sony, because they sold the rights to Sony ages ago when Marvel was in trouble, before Marvel Studios really took off with Iron Man, and before Marvel became the Marvel that we know today. And so there was this whole thing where they didn't have ownership of Spider Man, and that's why we have all the. But I love the fact that when they came in, there was actually it was called Homecoming, and there were so many different layers to the title Homecoming that it's like it's Spider-Man coming home to Marvel. It's all that kind of stuff. It was based around a homecoming dance, and and I love what they've done with them. I've loved what they've done with them. But let me start talking about Spider-Man No Way Home. I also love the really weird thing that they all have home in the title
Yeah.
somehow. They actually did a lot of jokes with that where obviously the three leads of the film are Tom Holland, Zendaya, and Jacob Batalon, and they had a bit where for 3 days in a row, each one of them on the Instagram account tweeted that new exclusive. We're gonna let you know what the new name of the new Spider-Man movie is, and one of them was like, "It's Spider-Man Home Slice," and they just sort of joked that they had this whole. Oh, I remember there was a show that they had where they had this whole board that had all the brainstorm ideas of what they were going to call the new Spider-Man movie. Was like Spider-Man, there's no place like home. Spider-Man, and but this one, it's No Way Home. They settled on No Way Home, and this film, I saw it last night, and there's many, very many times when it put a smile on my face. It is a very good film, and I will try and be succinct. I will try, I will try and encapsulate this thing, but I may just go all over the place. Please try and stick with me, and I will try and do all this without giving you any spoilers, because this is a film that inspired me to come out of the cinema. And the first thing I put on Twitter and on Facebook was go see this film before some mean, uncaring person on the internet spoils it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's
happens too
yeah.
many times.
I mean, already apparently I read in a message in the story today that Sony are actually going through the internet trying to stamp out Spider-Man spoilers, because there is so much that happens in this film, so much that happens in this film. I mean, beforehand, the director John Watts he referred to it as Spider-Man Endgame, so he, like jokingly referred to it as Spider-Man Endgame, and I can kind of see where he was getting at, because you know how there's so many moments that happen in Endgame, and there's things that happen in Endgame that are like, is that fan service? Is it great storytelling? I don't know. I just love it. And there's and there's loads of things like that in this film that happen that you're like, ooh, is it great storytelling or not? They if you've seen the trailer, it should come as no surprise to you. And talking about this film, you kind of have to spoil the ending of the previous Spider-Man movie. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man Far From Home, the premise of this movie is a spoiler about that film.
Right.
But by the end of that film, essentially, it is revealed that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And this film kicks off with everybody knowing Peter Parker is Spider Man and people having differing reactions to that. So there's people who think Peter Parker is Spider Man and he's a menace and he killed Mysterio, and Mysterio was actually like, the real hero and Spider Man's the bad guy. And there's people who are kind of like, oh no, no, Spider Man, oh Peter Parker, you're great, you're amazing. And his school is like, oh my god, Spider Man comes to our school. And they make a whole advertising campaign of how Spider Man goes to the school, and they have like a Spider Man shrine in the school done by the principals. And there's this whole thing, the fact that you know how it is that nowadays when there's truth and there's alternative facts in, in inverted commas, and they have this whole play on the truth of what actually happened, and how it, as much no matter how much he tries to tell people what actually happened, it doesn't really matter, because people have their own alternative facts and they want to believe what they want to believe. And so it and the idea is that Spider-Man goes to Doctor Strange and he says, look, ever since people found out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, my life has been hell. All the people I love, their life has been hell because they're associated with me. is there some sort of spell that you can come up with? You're a magician, okay? You're a sorcerer. Is there some sort of spell you can come up with that will make people forget that I am Spider-Man? And Doctor Strange, in his reckless way, is like, yeah, sure, we could totally do that. And so Doctor Strange starts coming up with this spell to make the world forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And when he starts, he doesn't explain it to Peter Parker to begin with, and he just starts doing the spell, and he says, "Right, that's it. Everybody's going to forget you're Spider-Man." He's like, "Wait, including my aunt? No, but I want her to know. I want her to know that I'm Spider-Man." And he keeps interrupting the spell to go, "Oh, what about my friend? Oh, what about my girlfriend? What about?" And in the end, the spell becomes so unwieldy that Doctor Strange just has to shut it down and close it off and go, "Nope, sorry, we're not doing it." And but the way it's done, I think one of the things I really like about this version of Spider-Man, Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man, is that he is a kid. They never shy away from the fact that he is a kid. So he's precocious as a kid is, he's annoying like a kid is, and he makes mistake like a kid does that have consequences that he doesn't see coming, that he's been warned about, but he still does it because he's just, in his way, he's just trying to do the right thing. And I think that's what, and so when he interrupts this is where we have the multiverse. The whole multiverse thing, and anybody who's listened to the show, and Sharon, you've been listening to me, and you know how averse I am to the multiverse, and how I think it is the beginning of the end, and how I think it's the beginning of bad storytelling. And there are elements of this where I think, okay, this is where it's beginning to eat itself. There are elements of it where I still think that. But my God, Marvel know how to tell a story. They know how to make it actually work and how to actually put it into the story so that it makes sense why that would happen. It makes sense why this, even when Peter Parker makes a big decision in this film, which at the core of it goes to the core of who Spider-Man is, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's trying to help. And you can see him as like a puppy dog who is just really, really trying to help and is wetting the bed. And even when he's making that decision, and you can see that there's going to be bad consequences that are going to come from this decision, you can still believe that he would do it. And they still manage to find a way to make it believable. So, I mean, in this film, you already know that Alfred Molina, if you've seen the trailer, Alfred Molina's in this film. Alfred Molina previously was in the second Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie as Dr. Octopus. You know he's in this film. You know Willem Dafoe's in this film. And so there's this sort of like break-in. So this is a bit where Marvel have almost stopped making films. They started telling stories that are about themselves. So this film is almost a meta commentary on the fight for who owns Spider-Man between Sony and Marvel. There's a reading of this film in which this film is more about that than it is about anything that's actually happening within the MCU. But it's so elegantly handled. The first hour... Sorry?
There's a scene in the trailer, isn't it, where, is it Doc Octo, whatever his name is?
Dr. Octopus. Yeah.
Says, "You're not a Spider-Man," because obviously he's not his Spider-Man.
He's like,
so
you're not.
Quite cleverly done. Sometimes
he looks like him. He's like, you're not Peter Parker.
It's very cleverly done.
Yeah, and I think that it's very cleverly done. It's very elegantly done. The first hour of this film zooms by, and I'm just kind of like, oh my God, because the last time we had a Spider-Man multiverse thing was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is just genius. And I was really worried that you wouldn't be able to match that because this is live action. This is live action, and you really can't match what you can do in animation and live action. But the first hour of this film zooms by, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is great. This is, and it slows down a bit. It sags a little bit in the middle before it picks up again towards the end. And it manages to say a whole bunch of philosophical things about what it means to be Spider-Man. And you might remember years ago me talking about how when I was growing up in Nigeria, we loved Spider-Man because he was a sufferhead. He was we could relate to him because his life never seemed to go well. and there's elements of that in this, and the characters that they bring in from the other Spider-Man movies that have already pre-existed, and the way they explain how they are there and what happens, I think is just really, really well done. And the cameos, there's one cameo that is not one of the ones you will expect. He's not in any of the trailers, and he shows up in the film. And when he showed up in the film, I punched the air. I was like, oh my God, yes, yay!
You had your O'Shea moment.
No, honestly, essentially, I was like, oh shit, oh my God, what are these guys doing? Oh, what does this mean? What does this mean? It was, I'm a Marvel fan. I still don't like the multiverse. I can see elements of this where it's beginning to eat itself, because now we're getting stories about that are kind of almost about the movie making industry, not so much about. They're about both. They're about the movie making industry and they're about the characters themselves. But with this and the new Doctor Strange movie, we're having a story where essentially the hero creates their own problem that needs to be solved. It's almost like the hero creates their own villain and then has to go and solve it, as opposed to this villain about supposed to this origin story for the
Yeah,
villain and
battling
everything.
a villain.
Yeah, I really liked this. I really liked this. There were so many times I had a massive grin on my face, and if I had to give it a star rating, I think I would have to give it. I would have to give it a 4, because I do think it sags a bit in the middle.
Yeah.
I do think it sags a bit in the middle. I know that there's people who give it a 5, and I totally understand that. I do not argue with that, but there's bits where I think it sags a bit in the middle. I think there's some scenes where, because with Marvel movies, sometimes the scenes where characters are just talking are almost as much fun as the scenes where they're punching everything up and destroying huge swathes of real estate. And there are some of the scenes where they're talking that don't quite work, but there's some of them that just totally sing, where you're like, I love this. More of these characters in a room talking, please. This is amazing. So this is, I think, ever since Endgame, this is the first Marvel movie that I've gone, right, I see where they're going with this. They've got it. And in typical, how there's many different layers to the whole homecoming and everything like that, there's many different layers to the idea of No Way Home. So what I thought No Way Home was going to mean before I watched this film, totally different to what I thought. When I watched it, I was like, oh, that's what they mean by No Way Home. That's what they mean by No Way Home. So yeah, it's really good. Love it. Love what they're doing. Love how they're bringing everybody together. Love what Kevin Feige is. And I just love the fact that they've built this world that makes sense. And I will keep talking for the entire hour if I didn't stop and just say, yeah, okay, one more thing.
4 stars. That sounds good, though. That sounds
yeah,
good.
Yeah. Okay, one more thing. So I've been watching the Hawkeye show on Disney Plus. And in Hawkeye, I think, Sharon, you would love this, because there's a bit in Disney Plus in the Hawkeye show where Hawkeye goes to New York and he goes to Broadway to watch Rogers the musical, which is a musical about Captain America. And it's little things like the fact, like there's a bit where Spider-Man is swinging through New York, and obviously New York, that's where Broadway is, and you can actually see in the background there's a Rogers the musical billboard. And I'm just kind of like, it's those kind of touches that make me think, yes.
They joined up those dots.
Yeah. I'm like, yes, I love this thing. It's like the comics come to life. And I will shut up now and let us go on to something else. So we are going to go over to what Sharon saw on Netflix and talk about Netflix and Friends. First of all, any questions about Spider-Man No Way Home?
No, I take it because you didn't appreciate it, you need to have seen the previous Spider-Man films.
Yes.
Do you need to be conversant with the whole of the MCU universe? Because I think that was the redundant universe. But do you have to be familiar with the canon to really appreciate it?
There's a couple of things you need to know. You need to know what happened in Endgame. And you need to know what happened in Endgame and what has led to this world. You need to there's bits where they do little bits of recap, but I think you need to know what's happened in the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. And you need to be aware that there have been previous Spider-Man movies. I think that's about it. You need to be aware that there have been previous Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
I think if you weren't aware of that, you would watch the film, and by watching the film, you would become aware of the fact that there are previous Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, there's other things out there.
Yeah, so I think that's about it. But I'll say go watch it. And I think for anybody who was a Spider-Man fan growing up,
they have to. It's essential, yeah. Because some of these the films where the canon has become so big now, I worry if I've missed an installment that I've lost something vital. And I think, can I watch this because I haven't actually caught up with all of the television series? Like I haven't seen Loki yet, and I've not watched Hawkeye yet, and I haven't seen is it Shang-Chi? So I'm thinking, I feel like I'm lagging behind, and I've got a lot of catching up to do before I can get back in the saddle with the MCU. So part of me thinks, no worries, that there's such a wealth of sort of film and television now to sort of plough through, that I worry that if I miss a bit of it, that it's going to sort of take something away from my enjoyment of the whole.
Yeah, I just get around that by not missing anything. But I see what you mean. I'm just kind of like, I'm like, yeah, I actually worry about reviewing Marvel stuff now, because I feel like essentially with them, I'm like, okay, they've gone to the stage that whatever they make, they will have my money, because
Yeah.
they will have my money, because I hope that I can still be objective and say things like it lags a little bit in the middle, but I'm just kind of like, these guys know
Yeah,
what they're doing.
they can
And I know,
deliver.
yeah, and I know that Sony are always trying to threaten to take Spider-Man away from Marvel, but for Sony's good, if Sony want to make money off Spider-Man, they should just leave him where he is with Marvel.
Yeah, because if
Because
people see this, they may think, actually, I might go check out those early Tobey Maguires, because there's going to be a generation
yeah,
who've
yeah,
never seen them. Because we tend to forget, because we can look back on our, you know, we're over 21, both of us, and
yeah.
we remember seeing these things. But then there's a generation of people who are 20 now who would have seen Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah, but also I just don't think Sony can do as good a job with Spider-Man as Marvel do. Marvel know exactly what the hell they are doing.
They know what they've got, yeah.
And
Even the fact
and
that when he started off, he had like the hoodie and he had like the mask.
yeah, yeah,
It was a homemade outfit, and it looked like a homemade outfit. Whereas in the past, they've suddenly produced these sort of leotards
yes.
and knocked up in their sort of bedroom, and you think, yeah. I
Yes,
don't know how many
yes.
teenage boys you know, but I don't think their sewing skills are up to that.
Yeah, yes. All right, cool. And before I give any spoilers, I'm going to shut up and move on, and we're going to talk about